Weeks passed, and life in the small town returned to its usual rhythm. The autumn leaves turned fiery shades of orange and red before falling gently to the ground, blanketing the roads and forest trails. Sarah continued her routine, training Titan and Luna with the same dedication that had defined her career for years. She didn't think much about the incident with the bikers. It was simply another day's work, a momentary intersection between her world and theirs. But unbeknownst to her, the bikers hadn't forgotten. One crisp afternoon, as Sarah drove her truck along the winding road leading back to the base, she noticed something unusual. A group of motorcycles was parked near the edge of the forest, their riders standing beside them. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary gathering. Bikers often took weekend rides through the scenic countryside, but then she recognized Razor among them. He was easy to spot, his distinctive leather jacket and bandana impossible to miss. Sarah slowed down instinctively, unsure whether this was coincidence or something more deliberate. She rolled down her window slightly, watching cautiously as Razor stepped forward, raising a hand in what looked like a gesture of peace. His face was serious but not hostile, and he nodded respectfully when he saw her stop. "Hey," he called out, his voice steady. "We weren't sure you'd come this way today, but we figured it was worth waiting." Sarah frowned slightly, keeping one hand on the steering wheel. Waiting for what? In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills and thick forests, there lived a woman named Sarah Collins. She wasn't just any ordinary person. She was a lieutenant in the military and one of the best K-9 handlers anyone had ever seen. Her job was to train highly skilled working dogs that could do things most people couldn't even imagine. These weren't your average family pets. They were strong, smart, and capable of saving lives. On this particular day, Sarah decided to take her two dogs, Titan and Luna, out for some training exercises. Both were Belgian Malinois, known for their speed, loyalty, and sharp instincts. Titan was all muscle, with a golden coat that shimmered in the sunlight. Luna, sleeker but no less fierce, had piercing eyes that seemed to notice everything around her. Together, they'd made an unbeatable team. After hours of running drills in the forest, Sarah felt it was time for a short break. She guided Titan and Lucy toward a small roadside diner tucked between tall oak trees. It wasn't fancy, just a place where locals grabbed coffee or a quick bite, but it looked inviting enough. As Sarah walked inside, her boots clicking against the wooden floor, heads turned almost immediately. Everyone noticed her tactical gear, her confident stride, and of course, the two magnificent dogs walking obediently beside her. At first, the room fell silent. People stared curiously, whispering among themselves about who she might be. Some admired her presence, while others simply wondered what brought her here. But not everyone shared the same curiosity. In the far corner of the diner sat a group of bikers, loud and boisterous, dressed in leather jackets covered in patches. They laughed loudly at jokes only they understood, their voices carrying across the room. When they saw Sarah, their tone changed. One of them, a big man with tattoos snaking up his arms, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look what we've got here, a girl playing soldier." His friends burst into laughter, slapping the table as if it were the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Another chimed in. "Yeah, those dogs probably can't even fetch a stick without tripping over their own tails." Sarah didn't react. She kept moving toward the counter, pretending not to hear them. Inside, though, she felt a spark of irritation. She'd dealt with doubters before, people who thought being a woman meant she couldn't handle tough jobs. But she also knew better than to let insults get under her skin. Instead, she focused on ordering her coffee and finding a quiet spot away from the noise. As she waited, Titan and Luna stayed close, their intelligent eyes scanning the room. The dogs were used to chaotic environments, so the bikers' rowdy behavior didn't bother them in the slightest. Still, Sarah could feel tension building. She hoped to finish her drink and leave without further incident. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. One of the bikers, a scruffy guy with a bandana tied around his head, stood up and swaggered over to her table. He planted himself right in front of her, blocking her view. "So," he drawled, crossing his arms, "what's a pretty lady like you doing hanging out with these fleabags?" His tone was mocking, dripping with sarcasm. A few of his buddies snickered behind him, clearly enjoying the show. Sarah took a deep breath, keeping her cool. She glanced up at him, meeting his gaze directly. "These fleabags," she replied calmly, "are worth 10 of you. They've saved more lives than you'll ever know." Her voice was steady, unshaken by his attempt to intimidate her. For a moment, the biker looked taken aback, unsure how to respond. Then, recovering quickly, he grinned and said, "Oh yeah, prove it." The challenge hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. On one hand, she didn't owe these men anything. They were strangers, rude and disrespectful. On the other hand, maybe this was an opportunity to show them exactly what she and her dogs were capable of. After all, sometimes actions spoke louder than words. And if there was one thing Sarah loved, it was proving doubters wrong. As Sarah walked away, her boots crunching softly against the gravel road, she couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. The confrontation with the bikers had started as something unpleasant, a test of patience and professionalism. But it had ended on a note she hadn't entirely expected: mutual respect. The change in their attitudes was undeniable, and while she didn't crave validation from anyone, especially strangers, there was something rewarding about seeing people recognize the value of hard work, discipline, and partnership. Behind her, Titan and Luna trotted proudly, their heads held high as if they knew they'd just accomplished something significant. And in truth, they had. These dogs weren't just tools or instruments. They were living, breathing extensions of Sarah's abilities, trained to perfection through years of dedication. They understood commands instinctively, responded to situations with precision, and carried themselves with an air of confidence that demanded respect. Today, they had proven their worth, not just to the bikers but to everyone who had witnessed the encounter. Back at the diner parking lot, the group of bikers stood silently for a moment, watching Sarah disappear into the distance. Razor leaned against his motorcycle, his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. For all his bluster earlier, he now seemed introspective, almost humbled by what had transpired. "You know," he said finally, breaking the silence, "I never thought I'd say this, but I think we got served today." His friends chuckled nervously, though there was no malice in their laughter. One of them, a wiry man with sunglasses perched on his head, shook his head in disbelief. "Man, those dogs are legit. Like, next-level legit. I mean, did you see how fast they ran? And how they stayed right on Razor without flinching? That wasn't luck. That was skill." Another biker chimed in, scratching his beard. "Yeah, and can we talk about how calm she was the whole time? Not once did she lose her cool, even when we were giving her crap. That takes guts, or maybe just knowing you've got backup that doesn't mess around." Razor nodded slowly, his usual bravado replaced by admiration. "She's not messing around either," he admitted. "That woman knows exactly what she's doing. And those dogs, they're like machines, but better, because they're loyal too." He paused, glancing at the others. "We underestimated her, big time." The realization seemed to weigh heavily on the group. Earlier, they had dismissed Sarah as someone trying to play a role, someone pretending to be tough because of her uniform and gear. Now they understood that she wasn't pretending. She was tough, not because of what she wore or carried, but because of who she was and what she represented. Her strength came from knowledge, experience, and trust. The kind of trust that only forms after years of working alongside partners who would lay down their lives for you without hesitation. One of the younger bikers, still looking a little shaken, spoke up hesitantly. "So, what do we do now?" he asked, glancing at Razor. "Do we just let it go? Pretend none of this happened?" Razor shook his head firmly. No way. We don't pretend anything. What happened today stays with us. It's a lesson, one we needed whether we realized it or not. He straightened up, his voice taking on a tone of authority. From here on out, if any of us sees her again, or those dogs, we show respect. No jokes, no smart remarks. Got it. The group murmured in agreement, nodding their heads. Some even tipped their helmets reflexively, as if practicing the gesture they'd use if they ever crossed paths with Sarah again. It was clear that the events of the day had left a lasting impression, one that went beyond mere embarrassment or regret. They had learned something valuable. True strength isn't about posturing or intimidation. It's about earning respect through action and integrity. Meanwhile, Sarah continued walking, unaware of the impact she'd made. She didn't need to hear their words to know that her message had gotten through. As she reached the edge of town, where the forest began to swallow the road, she stopped briefly to give Titan and Luna each a reassuring pat. "Good job, team," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. "You proved yourselves today," and reminded some people what it means to earn respect. Titan wagged his tail enthusiastically, while Luna leaned into her hand, her intelligent eyes gazing up at her handler with unwavering devotion. Together, the three of them moved forward, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Though the encounter with the bikers was over, its effects would linger, for both Sarah and the men whose perspectives had shifted forever. In the weeks and months that followed, Sarah noticed a subtle but undeniable change whenever she passed through the small town. The once hostile bikers who had mocked her were now some of the most respectful people she encountered. If they happened to see her truck, or even just caught a glimpse of Titan and Luna sitting in the passenger seat, they would tip their helmets or give a polite wave. It wasn't flashy or over the top. It was quiet, sincere acknowledgement that spoke volumes about how much they'd learned. One day, while stopping at the same roadside diner where the confrontation had taken place, Sarah experienced this shift firsthand. As she walked inside with her dogs, the familiar faces of the staff greeted her warmly. But what surprised her most was the reaction from the patrons, many of whom she recognized as part of Razor's group. Instead of snickers or jeers, there were nods of respect and even a few friendly smiles. One biker leaned over and said, "Hey, Lieutenant, good to see you again." Another added, "Your dogs still look sharp." Sarah couldn't help but smile back. She appreciated the effort they were making, not just toward her, but toward understanding the value of discipline, teamwork, and mutual respect. These men, who lived by their own code of honor on the open road, seemed to have found something in common with her world: the importance of loyalty and trust. The transformation didn't stop there. Word spread quickly among the townsfolk about the fearless woman and her remarkable dogs. Parents began bringing their children to catch a glimpse of Titan and Luna during Sarah's occasional visits. Kids would press their noses against the diner windows, pointing excitedly when they saw the sleek Belgian Malinois trotting alongside Sarah. Some even worked up the courage to ask if they could pet the dogs, which Sarah allowed only under strict supervision, and always after explaining the rules. "You can say hello," she'd tell them gently, "but remember, these are working dogs. They're not like your pets at home. They have jobs to do, and they take those jobs very seriously." The kids listened intently, wide-eyed with admiration, promising to be careful. And true to their word, they approached Titan and Luna with awe and caution, learning early lessons about respecting boundaries. Even Razor and his crew started showing up more often when Sarah visited the area. At first, it felt a little strange. These burly, tattooed men chatting casually with her about training techniques or asking questions about military K-9 units. But over time, it became normal. They weren't trying to impress her anymore. They genuinely wanted to learn. Razor admitted one day that he'd been reading books about dog training and behavior, inspired by what he'd seen Titan and Luna accomplish. "Never thought I'd get into all this," he confessed with a laugh. "But hey, life's full of surprises." Sarah found herself enjoying these interactions more than she expected. While she remained professional and reserved, she also recognized the power of connection. These men weren't so different from her in many ways. They valued strength, courage, and camaraderie. The only difference was that Sarah's team included four-legged partners who exemplified those qualities every single day. Eventually, news of Sarah's work reached beyond the town itself. Local newspapers wrote articles about her and her dogs, highlighting their achievements and the unique bond they shared. People from neighboring areas started attending demonstrations Sarah occasionally held at community events, eager to witness the incredible skills of Titan and Luna. Each performance ended with applause and cheers, reinforcing the message Sarah had been sharing all along. Respect is earned, not given freely. As for Razor and his group, they became unofficial ambassadors of sorts. Whenever someone new came to town and made a snide comment about Sarah or her dogs, the bikers stepped in to set them straight. "You don't want to mess with her," they'd warn with a chuckle. "She'll let those dogs teach you a lesson you won't forget." Their words carried weight because they spoke from experience, and deep down, they were proud of it. Years later, when Sarah looked back on that autumn afternoon, she realized it had been a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone involved. What started as a clash of egos had blossomed into something far greater, an enduring reminder of the power of humility, respect, and understanding. And though Titan and Luna eventually retired, passing the torch to younger generations of working dogs, their legacy lived on, in the hearts of the people they touched and in the lessons they taught. For Sarah, the memory of that day served as both a badge of pride and a call to continue doing what she loved, training extraordinary dogs and inspiring others to see the world through fresh eyes. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment, a challenge. Razor's hesitation didn't last long. His pride wouldn't let him back down now, not in front of his friends or the growing crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle. Straightening up, he shot Sarah a defiant glare. "All right, lady," he said, his voice louder than usual, as if trying to convince himself more than anyone else. "You want to show us something real. Fine. Let's see what your dogs can do against a moving target." The moment the words left his mouth, Razor realized he might have gone too far. He glanced nervously at Titan and Luna, who were standing perfectly still beside Sarah, their eyes sharp and alert. But it was too late to take it back now. The other bikers exchanged uneasy looks, some muttering under their breath about how this wasn't such a great idea after all. Still, none of them stopped him. Without waiting for Sarah's response, Razor strode over to his motorcycle, swung his leg over the seat, and revved the engine. The loud roar echoed through the parking lot, drawing even more attention from onlookers. With a cocky grin, he shouted over the noise, "Come on then. Catch me if you can." And with that, he twisted the throttle and sped off down the empty stretch of road leading out of town. Sarah watched him go, her expression unreadable. Part of her wanted to ignore the challenge altogether. It was reckless, unnecessary, and frankly dangerous. But another part of her knew this was an opportunity to drive home her point once and for all. These men needed to understand just how capable her dogs truly were. More importantly, they needed to learn respect for her profession, and for the bond she shared with Titan and Luna. Turning to her dogs, Sarah gave them a quick check. Both Titan and Luna were already crouched low, their bodies coiled like springs, ready to explode into action at her command. She knelt down briefly, speaking to them in a calm but firm tone. "Listen carefully," she said. "This isn't training anymore. This is serious. Stay focused, stay safe, and don't lose sight of your target." Her words weren't just instructions. They were reassurance, trust, and confidence wrapped into one. With a sharp whistle and a hand signal, Sarah gave the command, "Pursuit." In an instant, Titan and Luna bolted forward, their powerful legs propelling them across the gravel parking lot and onto the road. Their speed was breathtaking, their movements synchronized as if they were reading each other's minds. Within seconds, they were closing the gap between themselves and Razor's speeding motorcycle. The bikers left behind stared in awe, their jaws dropping as they watched the chase unfold. One of them muttered, "No way. They're actually catching up." Another shook his head in disbelief. How are they running that fast? Meanwhile, Razor quickly discovered he'd made a grave mistake. At first, he thought he'd easily outrun the dogs. He was on a bike, after all. But no matter how hard he pushed the throttle, Titan and Luna kept pace effortlessly. They flanked him on either side, their sleek forms cutting through the wind as if they were born to run. Every time Razor glanced over his shoulder, he saw their determined eyes locked onto him, unrelenting and unwavering. Panic began to creep in. Razor tried weaving back and forth, hoping to throw them off, but it only made things worse. Titan and Luna adjusted instantly, mirroring his every move without missing a beat. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. These dogs weren't playing around. If they wanted to, they could take him down right here, right now. Finally, unable to handle the pressure any longer, Razor slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt in the middle of the deserted road. He raised both hands in surrender, shouting, "Okay, okay. I get it. You win." His voice trembled with fear and adrenaline, his bravado completely shattered. Moments later, Sarah arrived on foot, jogging steadily behind her dogs. She whistled sharply, recalling Titan and Luna to her side. Both dogs immediately obeyed, trotting back to her and sitting obediently despite the chaos of the past few minutes. Sarah approached Razor calmly, her expression neutral but her eyes piercing. "These dogs are trained to neutralize threats in seconds," she said evenly, her voice carrying authority. "If I hadn't called them off, you'd already be on the ground. Never underestimate someone, or something. You don't understand." Razor nodded frantically, sweat beading on his forehead. I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't mean. I get it now." As Sarah turned to walk away, Titan and Luna following close behind, the message was clear. Respect wasn't given lightly. It had to be earned. And today, Sarah and her dogs had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they deserved every ounce of it. Razor stood there for a moment, his hands still raised in surrender, his chest heaving as if he'd just run a marathon instead of sitting on a motorcycle. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable now, replacing the arrogance that had fueled his earlier taunts. He watched as Sarah calmly walked away, her confident stride a stark contrast to his trembling legs. Titan and Luna trotted beside her, their heads held high, exuding an aura of quiet strength that made Razor feel even smaller. The other bikers were equally stunned. They had gathered near the diner, some leaning against their bikes while others stood frozen, unsure what to do next. None of them had expected this outcome. Not the speed, not the precision, and certainly not the sheer dominance displayed by Sarah's dogs. What started as a joke had turned into a humbling lesson none of them would soon forget. As Sarah returned to the parking lot with Titan and Luna at her side, she stopped a few feet away from the group. Her expression remained calm, but there was a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. She had proven her point, not just to Razor, but to all of them. These men, who prided themselves on toughness and bravado, had been put in their place, not through violence or aggression, but through skill, discipline, and respect. One of the younger bikers, the same one who had tried to pet Luna earlier, stepped forward hesitantly. His face was pale, and his hands fidgeted nervously as he approached Sarah. Mom," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. About before. You know, when I reached out to your dog, I didn't mean no harm." Sarah studied him for a moment, her gaze steady but not unkind. She could see the sincerity in his apology, and she appreciated it. "It's okay," she replied, her tone softer now. "But remember this, these dogs aren't here to be friendly. They're trained to protect me, and anyone else they're tasked with guarding, at all costs. When I tell you not to touch them, it's not because I'm being difficult. It's because I'm keeping you safe. The young biker nodded vigorously, swallowing hard. Got it. No touching. Ever. He took a step back, clearly relieved that she accepted his apology. The rest of the group exchanged uneasy glances, murmuring among themselves. Some nodded in agreement, while others avoided eye contact altogether. Razor finally mustered the courage to speak up again. He cleared his throat, stepping forward cautiously. Look, he said, his voice lacking its usual swagger. We might have gone too far back there. And, well, we're sorry. We didn't know what we were messing with. Those dogs of yours, they're something else. Sarah crossed her arms, her posture relaxed but commanding. She waited a beat before responding, letting his words hang in the air. Apology accepted, she said simply. But let me make one thing clear. It's not about me. It's about understanding what these dogs are capable of and respecting the work that goes into training them. They're not weapons, they're partners, and they deserve the same level of respect as any human teammate. Her words resonated deeply with the group. Even Razor, who had spent most of the encounter trying to save face, seemed genuinely moved. For the first time since Sarah arrived at the diner, the atmosphere shifted from hostility to admiration. The bikers began talking quietly among themselves, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity and appreciation. One of them, a burly man with a long beard, stepped forward holding a helmet. Hey, listen, he said awkwardly. If it's all right with you, maybe you could tell us more about him. Like, how long does it take to train dogs like that? Or what kind of stuff can they actually do? Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. She hadn't expected them to show interest beyond the demonstration, but she appreciated their willingness to learn. Training takes years, she explained. These dogs start young, learning basic commands and building trust with their handlers. Over time, they move on to advanced skills, tracking scents, detecting explosives, apprehending suspects, even working in combat zones. Every dog has its own strengths, and every handler learns to adapt to their partner's personality. She gestured to Titan and Luna, who sat patiently by her side. Take Titan, for example. He's built for power and speed, perfect for situations where force is needed. Luna, on the other hand, is more agile and intuitive. She excels at reading subtle cues and adapting to unpredictable environments. Together, they form a balanced team. The bikers listened intently, nodding along as Sarah spoke. Some even pulled out their phones to snap pictures of Titan and Luna, asking permission first. A gesture that earned approving nods from Sarah. The mood had completely transformed, from mockery and disdain to fascination and respect. Before leaving, the bikers' challenge hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and charged with tension. Sarah didn't need to respond. She already knew what she wanted to do. These men had mocked her and underestimated both her and her dogs, and now they were daring her to prove herself. Instead of backing down, Sarah decided it was time to show them exactly why she was respected in her field, and why Titan and Luna weren't ordinary animals. Fine, Sarah said finally, her voice calm but firm. She stood up, brushing imaginary dust off her tactical pants, as if preparing for battle. But there's one rule. No interfering with the dogs. Don't touch them, don't distract them, and don't get in their way unless you want trouble. Her tone left no room for argument, though the bikers exchanged amused glances, clearly thinking her warning was just empty talk. Razor, the leader of the group who had started all this, smirked again. Yeah, we got it. Just hurry up and show us what your lapdogs can do. His friends chuckled at his jab, but Sarah ignored them. She stepped outside, motioning for Titan and Luna to follow her. The cool autumn breeze greeted them as they moved into the parking lot, where the bikers gathered around, eager to see what would happen next. Sarah took a moment to survey the area. It wasn't ideal, a gravel parking lot surrounded by trees, but it would work well enough. She turned to face Titan and Luna, giving them a quick once-over to make sure they were ready. Both dogs stood alert, their ears pricked forward, watching her every move. They could sense the energy in the air, the mix of curiosity and hostility from the crowd, and they were prepared to act. "All right," Sarah said, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "Let's start simple." With a sharp whistle and a hand signal, she commanded, "Sit." Instantly, Titan and Luna dropped into perfect sitting positions, their backs straight and tails still. The bikers glanced at each other, unimpressed. "That's it," one muttered under his breath. Razor crossed his arms, looking smug. "Big deal. Any dog can sit." Sarah didn't let their skepticism faze her. She gave another command. "Down." This time, Titan and Luna lowered themselves smoothly to the ground, lying flat with their heads up and eyes locked on her. Still, the bikers weren't convinced. "Come on," Razor said loudly, rolling his eyes. "You're telling me these are the best dogs in the world? My grandma's poodle does tricks better than that." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. She hadn't even begun to tap into her dog's true abilities yet. Ignoring Razor's taunts, she issued a series of rapid commands. Stand, spin, heel. Each instruction was met with flawless execution. Titan spun in tight circles, while Luna pivoted neatly beside Sarah, matching her movements step for step. Their coordination was almost hypnotic, drawing murmurs of surprise from the growing audience. But the real test came when Sarah introduced distractions. Cars drove past on the nearby road, honking horns and kicking up dust. Birds chirped overhead, and someone's phone rang shrilly inside the diner. Through it all, Titan and Luna remained completely focused, never breaking their attention from Sarah. Even when one of the bikers revved his motorcycle engine loudly, trying to throw them off, the dogs didn't flinch. Impressed whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "Huh," one biker admitted grudgingly. "They're pretty good." Another nodded reluctantly. "Yeah, I'll give him that. Most dogs would have freaked out by now." But Razor wasn't satisfied. He stepped forward, shaking his head. "Okay, fine. So they can follow orders." Big whoop. "What else can they do?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, sensing the challenge in his words. "Oh, we're just getting started," she replied, her voice tinged with quiet confidence. She knelt down briefly to give Titan and Luna a reassuring pat before standing tall again. Now it's time for something a little more impressive. She reached into her bag and pulled out 2 traffic cones, setting them several feet apart to create a makeshift obstacle course. Then, using crates stacked near the diner entrance, she added height and complexity to the setup. The bikers watched curiously, unsure what to expect next. Some leaned against their motorcycles, arms crossed, while others shuffled closer to get a better view. As Sarah turned back to her dogs, her expression softened slightly. She trusted Titan and Luna completely, knowing they wouldn't disappoint. With a crisp whistle, she signaled the start of the demonstration. The dogs sprang into action, their powerful bodies moving with precision and grace. Titan leaped over the cones with ease, clearing the gaps effortlessly, while Luna darted underneath the crates, weaving through the obstacles like liquid gold. Their speed and agility were breathtaking, leaving the bikers momentarily speechless. The bikers were starting to lose their smug expressions. What had begun as casual mockery was slowly turning into something else. Curiosity mixed with a hint of unease. Sarah could see it in their faces. They hadn't expected Titan and Luna to be so disciplined, so precise. But she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. With the obstacle course complete, Sarah decided to take things up another notch. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a protective sleeve, a thick, padded arm guard used during bite work training. The moment she strapped it onto her forearm, Titan and Luna's body language shifted. Their ears perked higher, their muscles tensed, and their eyes locked onto the sleeve with laser focus. To them, this wasn't just equipment. It was a signal that it was time for serious business. "Okay," Sarah said, raising her voice slightly so everyone could hear. "Let me explain something. These dogs aren't just trained to obey commands or run through obstacles. They're also trained to protect. If someone threatens me, or anyone I'm guarding, they'll act instantly. No hesitation. No second chances. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. And trust me, you don't want to find out what that feels like. Razor raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Yeah, show us then, he challenged, leaning forward slightly. His tone was still cocky, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes now. He glanced at his friends, who shrugged in agreement. They weren't convinced, but they were curious enough to keep watching. Sarah nodded once, then turned to Titan. With a sharp whistle and a firm comment, "Attack." She signaled him to move. In the blink of an eye, Titan lunged forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on the protective sleeve with incredible force. Though controlled, the sheer power behind his bite was undeniable. The sound echoed through the parking lot, making a few of the bikers instinctively step back. For a moment, no one spoke. Razor stared wide-eyed at Titan, who held the sleeve firmly without budging, his teeth gripping it like steel traps. Sarah stood perfectly calm, her posture relaxed despite having a 70-pound dog attached to her arm. After a few seconds, she gave another command. "Release." Titan immediately let go, stepping back to sit beside her, his tail wagging slightly. It was clear he'd done exactly what he was trained to do. Nothing more, nothing less. The silence was broken by low murmurs among the bikers. One of them whistled softly, shaking his head. "Damn, that's intense," he muttered. Another added, "I wouldn't want to piss that thing off." Even Razor seemed rattled, though he tried to hide it. He cleared his throat and crossed his arms, trying to regain his composure. "All right, fine," he admitted grudgingly. "Your dog can bite hard. Big deal." But Sarah wasn't finished. She turned to Luna next, giving her the same command. This time, instead of attacking the sleeve on Sarah's arm, Luna demonstrated her ability to target specific areas. Sarah pointed to a nearby wooden post wrapped in rope, a stand-in for a potential threat, and commanded, "Apprehend." Without hesitation, Luna sprinted toward the post, leaping into the air and grabbing the rope-covered section with her teeth. Her grip was unrelenting, her body coiled tightly around the base of the post, as if pinning down an intruder. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. Some shuffled awkwardly, while others leaned against their bikes, trying to appear nonchalant. But the tension in the air was palpable. For all their bravado earlier, they couldn't deny that these dogs were far from ordinary. And worse for them, they were beginning to realize that Sarah wasn't bluffing about how dangerous Titan and Luna could be. One of the younger bikers, eager to prove himself after seeing his older companions grow quiet, decided to push further. Ignoring Sarah's earlier warning about not interfering with the dogs, he swaggered over to Luna, who had returned to Sarah's side after completing her task. "Hey girl," he said, reaching out to pet her. "You're not so scary, huh?" Before anyone could react, Luna's demeanor changed in an instant. Her playful wag stopped, her body stiffened, and a deep, rumbling growl erupted from her throat. The biker froze mid-reach, his hand hovering inches above her head. His bravado vanished, replaced by sheer panic as he realized just how close he'd come to crossing a line. Luna didn't move, but her piercing gaze locked onto him, daring him to try again. Sarah stepped in immediately, snapping her fingers and calling Luna back to her side. "I warned you," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the sudden tension. "These dogs aren't pets. They're professionals, and they don't tolerate disrespect." The young biker stumbled backward, stammering an apology. Sorry. I didn't mean anything by it." The rest of the group fell silent, watching nervously as Sarah calmed Luna with a gentle,